Welcome everybody. My name is Jon Gordon, co-founder here at the Chicago Bitcoin Collective upstairs of Fork and Coin here in Chicago. Really thrilled to be joined by Bryan Jones, our honorary member for the month, all the way in from Atlanta.
Paying member.
Paying member. It's really awesome to have Bryan here in person. We worked together for probably a year and a half, almost 2 years. We connected in the Bitcoin space when I was consulting and helping businesses integrate a Bitcoin strategy, mostly focused on healthcare. But Bryan heard me on a podcast, reached out, and we really connected to first help Jones Pierce, his firm, and he'll give more background. He's the architect for 25 plus years, and then also a Bitcoiner, and really helping bring the rest of his firm along in integrating Bitcoin for payment, saving in Bitcoin, reaching out to Bitcoiners. And then from there sprung HODL House, which Bryan will tell you the whole background. But I really honored to have you here. I think bringing a lot of your legacy skills in the architecture space and understanding what we've lost when we've gone to fiat money and what we can gain back by moving over to sound money is really an amazing gift. You've shared a lot of your work through writing.
Right.
So I think now speaking and getting out and sharing with Bitcoin community is going to be really important for this next phase of HODL House. So Bryan, welcome.
Thank you, Jon. And I've never been in the same room with Jon, so this is super nice to not just look at the TV and see Jon. And yeah, Jon stole some of my story, but I'm this is about HODL House, but it's also it's really a story about just normal people, normies trying to live with this stuff and see what they can do in their business and what happens over time. And that's what's been really kind of interesting to me is just, I'm class of 21 and kind of into my second month of the second cycle. So it's like just what's happened once you kind of going through the process to understand and then you start developing things for yourself and just the change and the excitement of, just kind of a normal guy doing that. So that's really the story here, which, it starts with architecture and finds Bitcoin and does some HODL, and then I'll tell you what Arch is about, which is kind of a progression. So it's really it's a story. It's a journey, not necessarily HODL. But HODL is a lot of it, very important part of the journey. But let's go to the next one, Jon. Like I said, I'm just kind of this normal business guy with 4-person team that does houses. I'm the crazy architect that does houses. When I was little, Mike Brady was on TV doing houses, but really those people don't exist except for there's people that do houses for the kind of the elite, and I know those people. I went to school with them, and they don't have budgets. And my other architect friends I went to school with, they do, schools, and they don't do houses. Only crazy people want to deal with people and understand their problems and kind of figure it out. And I enjoy the drama, so maybe that's my problem. But I'm just kind of normal guy with a firm that we focus on. We've always been successful, focused on the individual. We don't do developer work. We don't do for builder, we don't do plan books. We have a client and then we help them design something that they're trying to do. And these are usually fun projects because it's either somebody that, they're either coming together and having a baby and you have to do something. But then it's how do we get there? Or it's somebody that's kind of saved and been successful their whole life and it's time to build the forever house. Those are all kind of fun people to be around. And they want architecture, so that they kind of self-select in terms of they want to, get with us, because it's really interesting. You don't really need an architect to design a house, so that's kind of a Bitcoin thing too. It's driven by, a market. My market to compete is against plan books and against people doing it themselves, and so we've always had to kind of get to the point where why someone would hire us. So that's very pure. They're paying you with their money. I mean, it's a very personal endeavor. Even the way we invoice is crazy. We go once a month. We go, last month we used this much. Can I have your permission to send this invoice? Yes. Okay, good. You pay. But I don't have a big AR that way. But it's very personal. So anyway, but that's what we've been doing all this time. Let's go one more. So the kind of the problem I've been seeing, probably started noticing it kind of after the crash, coming out of the crash, like 13 or 14. You just always, we have a way that we design houses that is kind of using real materials, and the way that they perform high performance housing, in terms of how it operates mechanically, and just the air, that it's got a good envelope, and the way we want to design houses. What we've noticed is like that's a given. We've been doing it that way a long time. We slowly evolve our process to do it a certain way. But what I've noticed is like this house, that's just on here is a representation of kind of like, this is one of those forever houses, to where the guy, we've done 3 projects for this fella. The first one 20 years ago, we fixed the original house, we fixed the move-up house, and then this was like the forever house, like up in the mountains on this golf course. We did the house. So this house in 2020 would have cost, these are like 5,000 foot houses, so they're not small and they're not cheap, but let's say this house cost $1.3 million in 2020. This house in 2023 cost $2.5 million.
Wow.
And so this, if they built it today, I bet it cost 3.5.
Wow.
It's just, it's gone insane. And so the problem is, as a person that does these, that's what I want to do as my craft. Architecture is a practice. You practice because you get better over time, and you're really just doing this because you like it. But as a practice is what I want to do. So the problem is, like, the world's changing, and am I going to run out of people that can do this? Because again, we're not working for the elite. We're working for people like kind of, the 10% versus the 1%. People that have chunks of money, but they can do it and they can have a choice. But are we going to run out of those people? So that's what kind of the problem I couldn't ignore was, we're wrestling with that question. Are we going to have projects we can work for, people we can work for? So kind of leads to, this is, apologize in advance, this is a long story here, but it's really the journey, that kind of starts out with, it starts with the dock. This, if you zoom in up here, this in the front corner, that is a house that my wife and I kind of rubbed our nickels together in 2000 to build kind of a pavilion on a leased lot. So you didn't have to buy the lot. So we could focus all our money on the house. So yeah, we're 39-year-old people rubbing nickels and making this house as cheap as you could. We built it, half of it ourselves and stuff like that. But anyway, it's like our place where the kids, they could kind of grow up there on the weekends, not be where we live in Atlanta in the city, go out there, do Huckleberry Finn stuff, do all that stuff. So it's became our kind of our sacred place. But my goal was to build, that, which is this kick-ass giant dock. So you have to, I have this like a 1971 Sea Ray that was my dad's. So I have to have some place for that thing. And but anyway, I had this dream to build the dock. So my wife, she said, Bryan, you need $50,000 right here on this table before you get to do that dock. Because I had drawings of it and everything. And so I want to see it on the table because I have a history of going overboard on personal projects and probably for others too, but get excited. So that was in my brain. That was probably 2019. At the same time, I had a fellow that was trying to build with our firm, like a design build, and use our name. And so he gave me some money. And so for the first time in my life, I kind of took money and was going to invest it. Never invested outside, your 401k. So I chose to speculate, I guess, and put some money on Elon at that point in 19, which was, it looks like a shitcoin curve, at that point, it's at the bottom. And so that worked out. That was happening. So I was kind of preparing for this to get my money to build this dock. And, it just kind of put a timeline on that. At the same time, 2021 comes around and Bitcoin's kind of ripping. And I have this on my desk, I have this like little QR code of a Satoshi wallet. And what had happened was, in 2015, we had a ransomware attack on our server. And so I had to come up with a Bitcoin somehow, however you do that, to pay off the Somali pirates for my server. And so figured out how to buy Bitcoin. And so had that wallet, just a paper wallet, and it was just kind of talking to me at work, just like, I wonder if there's any change in this wallet. I wonder. And I had to figure out how to shoot it, which took 3 weeks. And so you finally shoot it, and you say, oh my God, there's $8,000 in that wallet. And so, well, that's cool. Let's figure out what this stuff is. And so that was kind of the start of, wanting to learn and going through all the motions. At that point, it was like the sailor breedlove stuff and just all that, consuming, just what is this stuff? So during that time, I was 21 in kind of April, May. It was still kind of ripping. I was taking Tesla, going sideways, not knowing you had to pay taxes and all that kind of stuff, and just kind of riding it up, trying to get to the point where I could build the stock. And by the end of the year, I could build a dock, and I was totally comfortable. But I got my bonus, and I was going, oh, I want to lay one more bet down. That was the mentality, lay one more bet down, so you could, so I want to walk out of this thing with a chunk that I can keep. And it was exciting to invest and kind of build wealth. I was interested in doing that. So I laid out my bonus there, and about January 15th, I think it started heading downhill. And I was having to pay I don't know if you guys have built anything, but the contractor sends you bills like on a Thursday. He goes, I need like $50,000 by tomorrow. And so, oh my God. So I'm like selling stuff, and I learned how to like take losses and gains and make it equal out to zero when you're selling Tesla and selling Bitcoin at the same time. But anyway, got to the end of that thing, June at the bottom, pretty much, right? Pretty much zero on my stack. And just at that point, but what I noticed going down was, the altcoins, I went through the whole thing of, diversify, 80-20, whatever. And I saw the altcoins fall off the cliff first, right? And you saw the market as we were paying for this thing, fighting. You know how the market fights up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And Bitcoin kind of came in for a glide. And somehow I remember I just said, I'm just going to DCA and just start here and start over. And just started doing that. And for the next 2 years, kind of did the DCA. Somebody said they worked for Unchained here before, but kind of figured out the, retirement stuff in Unchained, which if you're old, you can do that in-service distribution, which is a good move, and get your 401k in Unchained account. Did that. And so by the time I heard Jon on the podcast, I was ready. I did my personal, my retirement. I did my business, like treasury. Nothing giant, but just place to stash money. That was the mentality. That's the difference in how you were at that point. And so it's time I want to accept Bitcoin in my business. I want to figure out how to do that. So I heard Jon on the podcast, and kind of call him up. Hey, Jon, you do architects? But apparently it wasn't that big a deal. And so he had a little 6-week program that he would have to educate everybody. You can picture him with a bunch of doctors trying to like tell him how to do it. And from my perspective, I was the crazy person in the room, and I had my partner and my bookkeeper and controller once a month, and this retired guy that's my CFO once a month, and they're all looking at me like I'm crazy. Like, why are we doing this? So I endured the 6 weeks, and then I committed to Jon to I had this idea of HODL House, which the idea was that the principles of Bitcoin, the principles of good architecture are very similar in terms of building for the long term, thinking long term. So it just made perfect sense to me. And so I wanted to explore, what that would mean. So I had the idea, all I had was the word HODL House. And I had the naive marketing idea that, hey, I saw what Bitcoin could do. Maybe, Bitcoiners would want to buy a house same day. It was like more of a marketing exercise of just, I know this stuff. I want to get in the way of people who might want what I do. And so that's all it was. But I really enjoyed meeting Jon. I don't know what's next.
Slide.
Hello, Jon. Meeting Jon, and we kind of came up with this plan to write these essays to kind of develop the idea through writing. And so it started with, he had I talked about what I was trying to do, HODL House. It's something with architecture, something with Bitcoin. help me figure it out. And so, but he just had me start writing for, why I'm an architect, kind of start at the beginning, what architect and what business and Bitcoin can do together. Talked about, did this whole 3 or 4 month deal to get to the point of this is HODL House when we had figured it out. So that was probably 24. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so we did HODL House, and these are all just my architect people. We're on the side. We're learning Wix. We're doing websites. We're coming up with this idea. And so the next step with Jon, who's very involved in this, was like, okay, we came up, again, our idea was, we talked to Jon, and Jon was super cool. Every time we talked to him, he'd be in Costa Rica somewhere. And so, damn, that looks good. I mean, how does that happen? But he was a nomad, as you figure out, and can take a month somewhere, and that looked like fun. And so our concept was, okay, these people, have a 1-year-old, and at some point they're going to get tired of being a nomad, and they might want a house. And so how would we get someone in that position to buy something, go out and search and buy something? And so the way we considered that was we were going to first establish the vision, we call it life patterns, and then you're going to translate those life patterns into a plan, which we would call manifest, and we thought that was a cool word to take with you. And then as you go find these places in Costa Rica, if you're Jon, you go find your Costa Rican place, and we can look from space and decide how it should be sited and kind of help you kind of have the confidence to close on this house. So that was kind of the initial HODL House. And then let's go to and then it kind of resolved, the most important part was, understanding what you're trying to do if you're going to build this house. So the story behind this was, as I was, once a year I get to play at this golf course, and it's in my neighborhood, but I can't afford the country club. But I get to play with my attorney, who can apparently, and I'm like I'm his pro bono work, I think. But he's across the parking lot. And that's how we kind of got together. But playing golf with him, telling him what HODL's about, and he goes, "Yeah, those interviews sound cool, but you'd have to interview me and my wife independent, separate, because I'm a dreamer, and she's a pragmatist, and we're not going to go together." And it just clicked. And I said, "Oh yeah, we're going to interview you to start with, and we're going to interview you separately." We were kind of doing experiments at that point, but Jon was our biggest experiment in terms of just to kind of develop. We're architects, so we can't just come up with a process, and we have to do it as a project. We have to have a deadline where it doesn't happen. So, we're talking to Jon. Okay, we're going to work on life patterns. And so we kind of came up with these 3 questions. We knew we were going to do it separately. And, we have our meeting with Jon, and he says, "Yes, I'll do the interviews with my wife." And we said, "Great." Then we hang up and we look at each other and go, "Okay, what are the questions?" Because we had no idea. And so we came up with 3 questions, which are interesting, and they're not complicated. And the interesting part is they've never changed. And it's just think about if you're trying to tell somebody what you want. We're trying to look for how you live and your patterns. And so, okay, take us through your day. Wake up, open your eyes, what happens? And it goes all over the place. Some people are very, they don't want to tell you. Some people go in extreme detail, but it's good. We record these things, and we can turn into a transcript that we keep private. But anyway, so the 3 questions, tell us about your day. And then we ask the question of, okay, what's the coolest space you've ever been in? Think about it. And then tell us about it. And then we also kind of ask questions about kind of what's going on. Where's the sun? How many windows? Why? That kind of stuff. And then the last question is, let's say we get your place, you're done. Tell us about your day. So you go through that. So that's the 3 questions. And then that became the next. So I'll just go quickly through these, the life patterns. So this is kind of the first step in the process, which you do the interviews and you establish your life patterns. We did these, you do the interviews, and so we get the information, and then we'll come up with something that's not, it's not rooms, and it's not, it's an idea This is one of John's. Can I share this?
Yeah.
It's called, one of John's patterns after we talked to him and his wife was cycle of returning. That's kind of the nomad thing. They go out everywhere, but there's a cycle of how they return. And so what we heard him say was, you spent years in motion, living as travelers, learning through places, people, and change. Now you're ready to land. You want a home that reflects not just what you've been, but who you're becoming. Grounded, intentional, rooted in rhythm, not static, but steady. A place to return to again and again. And then that was kind of like what we heard. And then it's kind of like we translate that to, this pattern reflects your desire to live mostly at home, to build, host, raise your children, and grow in your rituals in one place. You still carry the spirit of the nomad, but your base is no longer temporary. It's a central thread, a place for quiet mornings, lively Sabbath dinners, for raising kids, for tending land, for remembering who you are. And then we kind of go into a paragraph of how that might take shape. This might take shape as a central stair, the anchor of daily movement, with communal rooms woven around in like a nest. Bathrooms to the east for slow waking, shared spaces in the west for firelight and gathering. From the front door, the curve of the stair, a glimpse of the land, laughter up from the kitchen. Your house holds motion, not to leave, but to deepen your return. So that is, there's got 6 of them out of this. And, that forms kind of, and you feel free to comment.
Yeah, I'll add in here that just going through that process with you, and my wife and I had our daughter in the end of 2023 in Austin, Texas. We lived there for a couple of years, and then we left in that following summer of 24. So we were traveling, kind of coming back here to Chicago to family, going to Costa Rica and going to Europe a bit, and kind of feeling like, okay, we're going to have to come and settle, or feeling the pull back home at some point. But going through this exercise with Bryan, and then Walden, who's Bryan's daughter, is an amazing artist, and I'll pass out the cards here, just distilling all of our thoughts and ideas of what would our ideal place look like before even getting into the drawings and in the physical world. And we lived a lot of places and have traveled, so we've gotten more of our kind of needs or desires were more clear, I would say. But being able to distill that into 6 patterns and having the artwork in like that feeling state of like, what would it feel like to live in a certain place, or really create that from scratch, is, I think, the best benefit of life patterns, of what the days look like. And my wife's been an entrepreneur for 10 plus years. I've been an entrepreneur now, so we have some flexibility and some freedom in that day, but obviously rooted in reality.
Do you remember if you aligned, or do you remember how close you were before or after? Did it make a difference?
Yeah, I think between me and Aaron and I, we were pretty aligned, I think, throughout. There maybe were some differences in the interviews, because we did get interviewed separately, and then you kind of compared them. But it was really cool to see how that came together, just in that first step, to hear, okay, here's what would be most important to her. I think there were some differences as we get into manifest of like, okay, where's the main bedroom? Is it upstairs? Is there downstairs? Is it one floor? But I'll pass these around. You guys can take a look. These are the 6 patterns that Bryan and team came up with.
But it's designed to align, whoever's going to live in the house, because it's interesting to do the interviews. You'll see some people that say they're going to be different, but they're really not. Just the different words they're using, or some people have things that are more important, but it's more of a yin yang thing. That's the package that you get and that everybody wants, and it's so it's interesting. So we do the questions. We send a little follow up that you can kind of work on together, and then that's what we take to kind of get to this point. So then after you kind of understand like your why, call that your why. Like, why are we doing this? And it's not, like I said, it's not rooms and all that stuff. It's like, what's the patterns? What are we trying to do? And so then you go to the manifest, which is, where we as architects and designers translate that into what that means. You have these patterns, but then we would send you kind of a little programming, now we are talking bedrooms and space and relationships, and we would send that to you, and you could respond, and then we combine that information with the patterns and the information from the program and come up with a plan. And so all these are, it's site, it's a weird word, but site agnostic. There's no site. But what you're doing is designing like the perfect relationships. Like you could hear the one that John was talking about, the east light. So that would mean that you would put your bedroom on the east side of the house, or where you buy a lot with the east light, you want your bedroom there. So that's where we could, if we have this, when we get to the next step, we could, from space, you can like analyze sites. And so you can take this idea that you have and flip it around, rotate it, and see if it's the right place. But so this is just, what you'd think of as an actual plan, and it's just trying to understand, from the patterns, is it going to be a cloister? How are rooms relating? In this case, we had some patterns that were, slide before, you don't have to go back, but the wife, they both had two businesses, and she wanted to be able to see where he's working, but not be near him. That's one of these.
Two work worlds held apart. So yeah, this was another. Yeah, that's funny. And then so you see how personalized these are. Like our 6 that they came up with are very different than the next client's 6. Ours were raising with wonder, the energy of it all, web of connection, healthy home, a room that's mine. And these are different. Where arrival slows, room for everyone's nervous system.
Yeah, this is another client. So do the manifest. The next step, John just happened to fall into line with the next step where it was time to find a house. So go ahead and click. Mm-hmm. We do site fit. So the original site fit was going to be take that manifest, go find your place in Costa Rica, and we'll make sure it works. So, but this one was what we found, and what was interesting was, John said, okay, I want to be here now. So I'm looking at houses, but you could still get value out of, we have the cards. We had this kind of scoring system we made up, how the life pattern, if we're satisfying the life patterns. Then we look at constraints of the lot, zoning, view, noise, sun, kind of all that stuff. Then there was also, we'd had a budget component. On John's case, we could have how you can get the plans off Zillow, basically. And so we could kind of analyze how much space we had to touch and kind of throw a square foot number at that, just so you would have an idea between, you were looking at 2 different houses, like which one you can just reuse without having to like blow it up so much.
Yeah. And then we were in a position where like we don't have land, we're not gonna build from scratch, but we want to evaluate what's on the market right now. And especially here, in the where we ended up being that close to family in the North Shore of Chicago, there's just not a lot of inventory. Things are inflated prices because the boomers have all their value in the home and they don't want it to come down, right? So they think their house is worth something. And we were actually renting in our hometown last summer, and even in kind of going through this process of, okay, we're looking at different homes and being able to evaluate against our life patterns, something that now exists in the physical world. How will this actually feel, a few years from now if this is what we pick? Was interesting. Yeah, and we
cool.
got super lucky and ended up finding a house that was actually designed by an architect for his family in the 60s. And it's like a split level, and having gone through this exercise, and really manifesting is like, okay, this feels right. And
but did it let you pull the trigger? Like you kind of knew you could commit
we
faster?
Could. Yeah,
you were feeding us like.
Well, there actually was one, and then this was before I met Julio. But we did an inspection. I think it was at the house you actually scored here. But then what you couldn't find from above was that there was a 45-foot bend, like 12, 15 feet underground of the gutter on the sewer on the way out.
Oh.
And we're like, all right, no thanks. And so we got out of that one and ended up finding something else. But
this was kind of like the first, accidentally was the first, it wasn't pure, HODL was very pure in terms of, life pattern, manifest, go find a place. But we saw it worked here. And we were also at that point, we were running our normal architecture clients through it. We would start doing interviews with everybody. And, some of the stories were crazy. We'd worked with this one client for, 4 months, and we had to make a change to where we're going to tear down your house. It was one of these moves. And we said, we're doing this interview process. Let's try it just for the pivot. And we're learning things like all of a sudden you learn that he has a bad back. He gets in the shower every morning cold and does 50 squats until, his back loosens up. It's like, okay, we didn't know that, So people have those thoughts in their head. They're trying to look at a drawing to make sure it works. And, this is so much, it's easier just to start in the right place. And so, his new house, we fixed it. So anyway, John was our good. So the proof was, the punchline was, John bought his house. Yay, good for John. So
Very
anyway,
grateful. Yeah.
so next slide.
And I did get these blown up and put on the wall too, so we have them like upstairs. And people that come in the house can see all the thought and work that went into it. Because really, and for me, not having gone through this process before, and I think a lot of us millennials in a similar boat, or switching cities, or renting, or kind of figuring out what it's going to look like. We haven't even worked with an architect or know the process. But from what I came to understand, is this is even like the pre-process for even what an architect would take from here.
It is. So we did have some. So that was middle of last year. So for the last 25 into the year, we did have some validation. I was doing those article, the writing on Noster, got somebody to contact me. We did a guy that was, they go to Maine every summer, and at some point they want to get a house there. They could do their family place in the summer, and we did him. And I was on Brandon's, you sent me with Brandon, do his podcast.
Yeah, and he's a member here. He unfortunately couldn't make it today, but yeah, he's excited about it. But
had one fellow this guy called us that was really excited about the whole thing. We did his, that was the HODL, that's the ones that you saw, those two. They ended up, he took his cards home for Christmas, his dad saw them, and ends up they have a family office, and we did a group HODL for theirs, because they just purchased this land in Montana, and it's like, how do we align 4 kids to manage this land? What are we gonna do? So it worked for that too. So we did have validation. Nice. Kind of the work is beautiful. Like, those drawings are beautiful, and we're spending a lot more time than we're getting paid. I can tell you that. So we're a small business. So at the end of last year, it came down to, I need to focus my time on my studio, and everybody needs to get got to pay people, got to pay myself, and so HODL was like this year-long experiment, and we learned so much from it. And it kind of, I started the year with, I'd taken an AI kind of 40-day class of how to like set up an OS and, produce content. So I started the year saying, I'm going to set up my AI to produce content for my studio. So I started that process, ended up kind of kept coming back to HODL kind of stuff that I believed in. And kind of ended up to the point, what's the next slide? Thinking about the ideas, thinking the idea of like where projects come from. And what I did, it was during that time, thinking about the jobs that we did get, and 25 was not an easy year, because you had tariffs and all that stuff going on. It was kind of, people were stopping, they weren't continuing, people were stalling, doing anything. I mean, we're survivors, we survive. But I went back to the year and just think, where did our jobs come from last year? And so, HODL was probably this number one, we want alignment. HODL produces alignment, between people. And we had other jobs, which existing asset repositioning, that's basically a renovation. People calling you to go, I got this house, do I renovate it? Do I tear it down? Do I move? So we do that. And reactive property decisions, that's when someone calls you and it's an intervention, to where they have a contract and you're trying to like help them not buy this house by the time they're supposed to close if it's bad or something like that. So we got involved. Strategic property search, we had people that, I want to buy in this area, help us find something, evaluate. Portfolio strategy is basically a second house. It's like, once you can get to the second house point, you kind of want your experience assets to be different. Like, you don't want your city house to live like, that's the whole benefit, a lot of times. So but that's a second home. We've done some inherited kind of family land. Like, what do we do, as a group? And we did this kind of
family
office
alignment.
So the idea, what happened was, analyzing where these jobs come from, the idea was, that's the space that I wanted to be in. Because it's you kind of describe it as, I'll go on the next slide, but in terms of the way it works, a normal architecture project, design, price, detail, build, we do that. I mean, we know how to do that. That's like, picture like the Sherpa, how to get the crap to the top of the hill, right? That's what you got to know how to do. we've always done this viability process before those jobs start, which is, it says discover, align, translate, filter, commit. That's the HODL, that kind of process. So what HODL allowed us to do was to say, I want to be in the place where jobs come from. And I don't want to wait around for something to happen. And it makes sense that, you would be in the planning before, when these decisions are being made. Like, it's not the realtor, and it's not the builder, and it's not yourself. We know how to do that. We should be in the room when that's being discussed. And that's where kind of we combined just our tactics for HODL to that, and it let us kind of organize that process. So that was our big discovery, and we're calling that arch work. And arch is a kind of like a Greek word when you look it up for origin, and so origin work. And so that's kind of the idea. Being in the room before, when decisions are made.
And I'll add, maybe you could speak to this during our process. It was interesting to learn about some of these patterns in architecture. Maybe you can speak about the book that you use in a lot of your work. But at the bottom, you'll notice on the cards, there are these different numbers on there, and that corresponds to a certain pattern of architecture that was developed, pre-fiat, right? And you had different examples too of what that would look like based on your own work as well.
Well, it's a component of this. There's a fellow, Christopher Alexander, and it's in one of my essays. But it was like, I kind of wondered. It was this book, this Pattern Language by Christopher Alexander,
yeah.
And it was designed to produce authentic architecture. And so the way that worked was you had this pattern. It was like the way they used to design houses in the old days, 20s and 1900s. They have a pattern book, and you had these house patterns that carpenters would just build a house. And so he named this book Pattern Language, where you kind of do the same thing with people were supposed to get this book and go through 300 patterns and pick the patterns that work and design your own house. So that never really worked. But when you're in school and you don't know what you're doing, you learn from scratch how to design, right? So that's what we used in school. Was kind of when I was in school, was about the time this was out. And you're kind of saying, oh yeah, I want a train compartment, little alcove for my kids. We did that at our lake house. When I went back to this book, and the real point was, how did people think about houses before 1971? What is authentic architecture before that? And it was just really more of a curiosity to kind of get into this book. And I think it's a great way, especially with, I think, using the tools we have now to kind of have these patterns align with what people are saying. That's very interesting. We haven't figured it out yet, but I think it's going to end up being kind of like an addition to manifest of like you're designing, but then you're also kind of filtering through some patterns that could work just to kind of show them. I'll show you where we kind of dealt with it on our website. And that's,
this is the asset architecture.
Kind of the point is the original point of HODL was, how are you going to get these people that have this asset to trade it for something else? And my belief from my side is, I think I can design a house that is an asset that's worth trading for. So there's that kind of going on. But we have a strong, I want to hitch my wagon to asset architecture. That's why we're doing this thing. Now, we're doing it not for people to have 5 houses, because that's where they want to stash their cash. We want to design authentic houses for the people that are going to live in it, for the sake of utility. And I think housing, it doesn't have to be your biggest liability. It needs to be an asset in your life, and it could go, asset architecture. It's like, my thoughts are, how do you make a house, give you a little rent, or give you clean air, or save energy, or produce food? Like your home base here needs to do all that stuff, because that's like, it's your citadel. I mean, that's your place. So I think architecture can do all that. And these are all kind of projects we've done, and they have kind of the patterns of Alexander in it, like home that lasts, sizes of balconies, windows. I don't know what that's.
And I think this one, a home that lasts, I mean, that's really speaks to the Bitcoiners because today the building, I mean, we can speak to this process and why such a small percent of houses even have architecture. It's all prefab or you have materials that aren't going to last more than 10, 20 years.
It's the same, it's industrialized housing. So it's like, you know, fastest way to the bottom, you know? So there's still people that can build houses the right way out there. So
but we don't see it that often, and houses are used as a savings vehicle instead of a consumption good, which it is. But here, the consumption good, and what I feel like really you're offering is that value for value connection with an individual who is a Bitcoiner and knows what they're holding in terms of value, but then wants to exchange it for something here that is really valuable.
And I think it's you know, Bitcoin gives people a way that even to know that in the future you can afford a house. So that's the dream, I guess. And you know, when we did HODL House on the website, we had one kind of target customer that was kind of like alignment, like thinking about people just getting married or coming together. Like, can we get alignment of what are our 6 things that we're living for, and why, you know, 10 years from now we can do a house. That's what we're going to do. It's like it's the torch you carry to kind of go through life. So that's part of it too.
Speaking of the website, should I pull it up real quick, do you think? You want to pull it
I'm
or
fine.
not yet? Or you want to, do you have any more, you have one more slide here?
Oh yeah. Yeah, let's just do, I'll finish up, then we can do the
Yeah, I'll
website.
show the website.
So, you know, my closing is, and it does, I got something pretty good in terms of where we were on the Bitcoin. The Bitcoin, I think it does give people the chance to think about doing a house instead of saying, well, I'll never have a house. Yeah, that's pretty sad. But I think that kind of gives you a dream. And I think it wasn't easy when I bought a house, and it's never going to be easy. And the point is that you're not going to get very many chances. And so when you do have a chance, you got to hit. I mean, you got to get a hit. So, you know, houses are expensive. Land's expensive. Your capital, your Bitcoin's precious. Families are busy. Most of us don't get 10 tries like the old days of like, we'll move in 3 years, it'll be fine. So you don't get that anymore. We might get 1 try. So, you know, our job, like I said, is to let you hit the first pitch. And if you can get this kind of alignment, we think that's possible.
Awesome.
So we can look at the HODL House.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and to that point, though, of having hope for the future, if you are pricing in Bitcoin as your unit of account, the average price of a house 10 years ago was 600 Bitcoin, and now the average house is 6 Bitcoin, right? Maybe 7 or 8 Bitcoin now with the dip, but like still, you know, you get the idea, right? And it's
61,
a long-term,
318.
Yeah, so that's, you know, in 2036, where are we going to be at, right? Maybe it's 2 or 3 Bitcoin or even less, but that, yeah, it gives you the opportunity here. But yeah, speak to this.
Yeah, this is kind of when we first started, you know, people. The whole point was path to place was kind of the idea, you know, helping people find their places, you know, Bitcoiners, young professionals, couples, the alignment thing, multi-generational planners. You know, we were just trying to think who the use case was, but it has, you know, kind of, there's talks about what these things are. You could read about it. It has our writings on there. If you go to the experience, that's where it has that cool grid, lots of stuff.
Bless you. All right, here we go.
So these are those Alexander patterns that we kind of, you know, put on pictures of our jobs, but just what we were thinking, you know, in terms of those patterns. I know, and that's something I'm really excited about this year, is just kind of working, kind of integrating those patterns into. It's kind of like he established his database. And so let's figure out how to use that.
But the talent is turning that little drawing into that. You know, that's
Oh, yeah.
like
That's the secret sauce, and that's the magic. Yeah, to see, and it visually very, very appealing, and you can see the quality in the work. And yeah, any you know, so, and are a lot of these jobs more recent, or these were from things you've done over the last decades, and have
it's a blur.
Matching these?
Probably 10 years.
Outdoor cooking. A lot of things that I think.
There's a lot of nooks, like they'll go up a little bit, back up, right there on the left, or like that one. So back away and look at the picture. So like training compartments, sleeping, he's been doing that for 28 years. And so, but every house has it because they all want it. They all want their kids in training compartments, you know.
In that one, the grandfather, he sleeps in the top because you can see out those windows right there. That's where he wants to be.
And then from a Bitcoin standpoint, integrating with Zaprite, it's really not that hard, right? We have a way to accept Bitcoin payments and a nice UX. You can do your invoices and send them to Bitcoiners. Maybe you don't have to chase as much as with any fiat sort of clients, but that piece of it, built into the process too.
Yeah, that's a goal for beginning of next year. You have to do these things kind of at the end of the year or the beginning of next year, but that's definitely something I'm getting into now.
Yeah.
Just to save the freaking 3%. It's like, I don't understand. Like, why?
Yeah,
we do ACH just because no one wants to pay 3%, but I'd rather have settlement. But anyway, awesome. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, do we have any, give it up for Bryan. And do we have open up for any other questions from folks or what comes up?
So you find a lot of people using this for just to find, like what Jon did to find his house? Is it useful for that?
Well, what's going on right now is that since we've been working on this archwork idea, it's kind of like every lead that we get, I filter it through those narratives to determine, is it fine alignment? What narrative is it? And we're using kind of AI as a way to help, with less people to manage that process. So it's just a tool, but you have to operate it. But it can help you organize and kind of align with, present to that narrative, show them what the process is. And what we're doing right now is think about life pattern. If you thought about your sequence of steps for each of those pieces of work, if that goes 1 through 7 for life pattern and 1 through 10 for manifest and 1 through 8, we now have all those as something that we can take those narratives and then take a prescription of those steps and assign it to the narrative. Sometimes you want to analyze the site before, sometimes there is a site, so you need to analyze it. So some of the site fit stuff happens at the top. So we can now have a narrative, prescribe what the scope is to go through the effort of what they're trying to do, figure out what they're trying to do. So that's been kind of fun.
It seems like you can even create a roadmap of how your house buying life will be. So when we're 40, we're going to want these things, and we're going to want, we're retiring, so we're going to want, and you can almost just create a whole.
For custom houses, people, what I noticed,
saying about finding what you love.
Yeah. So what I noticed for that kind of thinking lifetime house, that's been a principle of ours for a long time, and it kind of happened from, the crash. It's after the crash, people were not buying houses just to flip; they were buying houses to live in. So it's all of a sudden we're making plans for an elevator that you may not put in right now, and you're thinking we're going to be here for a while. How do you start with yourselves, have kids, back off? How does that work? How do you live in your house for a long time, and having a plan for how that works and spacious change and that kind of thing. So custom it's kind of like the puzzle, and it's the fun part. You're trying to assign life to this static thing, but there's ways you can do that to have a lifetime home. And I think we've always kind of designed that way because it's always been expensive. We always are in town, and every square foot is precious, and so you're trying to use it 3 different ways. And so all this, it's all consolidating. What I would just say is, I've always had these beliefs, but just having Bitcoin in my life and just having the awareness, I guess, whenever you swallow the pill, you start thinking a certain way, and it affects everything that you're doing, and you see it all coming together, with stuff that you were already kind of believed in. and just helps organize it. And it's been a fun, 4 years for me, and I can't wait for the next 4 years.
So I think the other thing for him, just being his partner, is, we cannot stand to go to a place and have a realtor give you this checklist.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have a closet in the bedroom.
Well, we don't care, because you're never gonna sell this thing. Like, it does not matter. Like, that drives us insane. Like, realtors and these checklists, it's not who you are. It's, it doesn't matter that there's 4 bedrooms. You only need 2 bedrooms, but it's still a valuable house. It creates an environment for your family that is irreplaceable. And so that's the, so when he says custom, it's like for you, and it's for your lifetime, and it's for your kids in the future, It's not about the realtor checklist. So it doesn't matter.
Any realtors here?
Sorry.
We wanted to try to bring some in, but
Sorry, Joe.
A realtor using that approach would blow away the market, because there's no one doing that.
tried to invite some realtors. We have Julio's a home inspector, so he's touching a lot of homes.
Figure out who are you gonna sell this house to next? I mean, that's
You're not gonna know the house.
right, that's the
thing.
difference. The mentality
Right.
today is you need to buy a house with who you're selling it to in mind. Even though you're using 2, more people need 4 bedrooms, so buy that one.
Those are the most fun houses. I mean, the clients you have, a lot of our clients after the crash too were cash. So it's like, that's a completely different house, just because the bank's not telling you what to do, because the bank's list is moronic. It's like,
And it's kind of architecture is art form, and you go back and you've traveled quite a bit, and you go to places in Italy or in Florence or on the Mediterranean, and you see these structures that have been around 600, 700, 800 years. And you're like, well, we had the floor in that was 3.5 grams of gold for centuries, and you could plan and you could build amazing structures and have design and like inspiring physical places, whether in the community or for your home. And I feel like we've lost that since we've gone to fiat money, and reintroducing, and now homes designed by architects are scarce, just as Bitcoin is scarce. And you have some of the kind of what is the architecture of sound money, and the durability here, the decentralization, using your house to create that self-sufficiency. We had Rev HODL here last week. He was selling his lamb and his eggs and his maple syrup that he makes on his own land and sells it for Bitcoin to Bitcoiners. And you have pockets of that, and that's definitely one of the goals here at Chicago Bitcoin Collective, is highlighting and featuring really artists, but value creators that are providing something that the market is seeing less and less of because of commoditization or these checklists from realtors in this domain. But you go across any domain and you see it there. So I don't know what
we're in holding pattern.
Yeah.
We're in the infancy, but I think, it's like, planting a tree. It's not for you, it's for somebody else. It's kind of like you're, I think the potential is just that people in this room will have the opportunity. So it's kind of like, I want to keep how we do things alive so that can happen, because there's plenty of, we're so small that we're going to find people to work for no matter what, because it doesn't take that much. But there's people that still do this, but I want more people to do this. And it's because of how meaningful it is for your life and for your, your life potential, and to be your best self. We can help with all that stuff. But thank you so much.
We got one question here from Noster.
Okay.
Nice.
User. We have Chris Stark asking about some new building materials, but he asks, have you thought about 3D printing through these larger platforms, people that are developing this technology? It seems like a novel method to address some of the built to last and cost issues surrounding new construction while giving you design flexibility. What do you think about 3D printed homes?
I've just kind of watched the YouTube videos. That's about all
okay.
I know. The interest is that you could build with, when you see the concrete kind of slurry stuff happening, it'd be interesting to have like John's houses that he was talking about that last forever, is because they're built out of stone. And it'd be interesting to build like that. It depends on your climate. That stuff, you got to have the way houses perform in the south versus the north versus desert, you know, is completely different things. So, you know, it'd be great to have the structure be, even if you have the structure that you can do custom, maybe that's the trick, is you can do your custom structure, it lasts forever, but you're still gonna have to do this other stuff around it to make it perform and not give you mold and all that stuff.
Yeah, we did have a member bring, I think Peter brought a 3D printer here, but I don't think we're printing any homes out of CBC.
I've seen it, like Georgia Tech and those kind of places, they have these giant like CNC things running around. They're usually doing squares, but we'll see.
I mean, the top of Sagrada Familia, they're doing 3D printing.
Oh, that was
Really?
cool.
To get the top,
Oh.
the very, very tippy top of the final structure of it.
That's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
they can-
it happens, we do it in deep interiors for details,
Mm.
but not like the structure of the house.
Mhm.
Thank you, Noster.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Otherwise, you know, this was awesome, Brian. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom and coming by Chicago. We'll have to, if you're down in Atlanta, definitely give Brian a holler. But we'd love to have you back at some point, you know, in the
Awesome.
future. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
We can enjoy. We got some charcuterie here. If